Okay. Sorry, AV guys, can we have the Q&A system up? All right. Oh, that's a tough first one. Actually, Carlo, I'm going to give you that first one. Congratulations.
Very interesting question. I think there's probably, let me mention a couple of things. The first thing is, what is the key thing about data, about, all this kind of digitizing the physical world? Well, the key thing is that we learn a lot more about the consequence of what we do, and then that is the first step to promote behavioral change. I'll tell you a little story about, the last project I showed, the one about tracking trash, and then, after the project, we did a few questionnaires. We went back to people who participated as volunteers in the project and asked them, did this information change your behavior? And it turns out it did in many different ways. We actually started doing statistics on that. I'll tell you just a little anecdote of somebody who told us, I used to drink water in plastic bottles every day. And then, I would throw them away and stop thinking about them. But now, after the project, I know that some of those bottles go to a landfill a few miles from home. They will stay there forever. So I stopped drinking water in plastic bottles. So the idea that basically data is the first step in order to promote behavioral change. And so I would say that, there's probably one thing that would be interesting would be to, if you're able to map also food wastage, and show it and give that information back to people, it could be the first step in order then for us to be more conscious. Because ultimately, a lot of the waste comes from, if you talk about the waste that comes from the consumer side. That's one thing. The second thing, I think, is that if we trace better all of the supply chains, all of the, all what happens to products as they move, then we can also be more efficient there, because there are some inefficiencies that contribute to waste. And perhaps the third thing then is how we can really think about new formats. They can be less wasteful. And as I mentioned before, Italy, the thing that puts together like a market, a farmer's market or a market with the restaurant, is a good way also to avoid some of the waste that happens in a supermarket, because some stuff might expire, you throw it away. Well, if you monitor that in 3 days, when it's still something you could eat, you use it in the restaurant, it becomes a way that you reduce waste. So I would say the three things. So the first one is about behavioral change, and then it's about tracing all the movements and so on, and maybe we can actually increase the efficiency in the whole chain. And the third one is about designing new formats that maybe can be less wasteful.
Thank you. Rich and I just coordinated a blockchain response, so we might do that now that we've coordinated it. So it's going to be a tag effort, and then I'll go back to the top one.
Is blockchain technology in the digital traceability mix for MLA? It should be, and Sean can answer whether it is or not. The reason that it should be, very similar to what I was talking about, the MLA's role in sort of facilitating the development of data lakes and things. Blockchain is going to be incredibly important for food traceability and safety, and there are already huge amounts of investment going into it globally from companies like Nestle and Walmart and others, purely on the traceability issue, being able to trace food back to the source when there's food scares really quickly without delay to know where it's come from. One of the problems with the implementation of blockchain, actually getting it to work, is that it is a whole of value chain technology to work properly. So it's got this sort of critical mass issue. You can't just have it working in one part of the value chain. It needs to sort of happen instantly all at once across the whole value chain, or it doesn't really do what it's supposed to do. So there is an industry context there in terms of, again, just facilitating the discussions, facilitating the relationships, promoting it for industry good, or it's going to be quite difficult to see how it's going to implement otherwise.
Richard, as of about 60 seconds ago, it's now part of MLA's mandate. So, no, all seriousness. So MLA has about 3 or 4 industry projects at the moment, trying to understand where is the fit for blockchain in our industry, and is there a value proposition? I was just reading through the program to make sure I wasn't going to contradict myself. So when we first started to develop this program, we had a session on blockchain. The MLA team and myself decided we might actually be different than every other digital conference for the last 2 or 3 years and not necessarily talk about blockchain as a subject. So we've consciously left blockchain off the topic. However, MLA is undertaking projects in that space at the moment. And I'm sure what I'm about to say will evolve as the results of those projects come through, but I'll give you a Sean Starling view of where I think blockchain fits at the moment, and it's just, I think, agreeing with Richard, which is if you've got an existing supply chain with trusted relationships, blockchain can bolt on very, very well and save transaction costs that you already have as a trusted supply chain. What I don't think blockchain is, but I'm happy to say and stand up here in 12 months' time and say I was wrong, is it does not create trust in a supply chain that doesn't have trust already. So we think for red meat supply chains that are really from paddock all the way to the consumer, that's already very, very well trusted, got trusted relationship, blockchains are nice, bolt on over the top, that then gives the consumers a bit more reassurance and a bit more transparency about what's happening in that space. So definitely it's a watching brief. It's not going to go away. You'll find people that will speak highly of it and try to sell it to you. You'll speak people of it that don't speak highly of it at all. And definitely MLA's role in this space is to make sure and understand where does that fit in our value chain, especially with respect to the consumer side of the value chain, and to make sure that we are a part of it if it is a part of the future, and I think it will be. I'll just do the last one and then we'll break for afternoon tea. So who will validate and police all this data? Actually, I might get Richard to maybe help me with this one as well if he's happy to. That is connected to food products. JJJ, I'm not sure what that is, could vouch for us and get the vegans on board. So from my perspective, I'll have a go at it first. And it was one of the things I said on Farm this morning. Our carbon neutral announcement 12 months ago, I've had a look at some of the data you need to input. And it was a bit like, I think, Richard's Coles example. At the moment, for us to try and understand, is your property, is your business carbon neutral, or how's it going on that journey? It is a lot of manual data input. And I think having the solution providers that you've seen today get their systems ISO accredited, and I think that's key, getting their systems ISO accredited over the next 5 to 10 years, and making sure that the data coming out of those systems are calibrated, are secure, then I think by default that becomes a bit of the policing mechanism. But Richard, have you got anything on?
Consumers will. They'll validate it, because if it's the wrong data or data they don't relate to, they won't buy your product and you won't have a market, and so it'll pretty quickly sort itself out. But the other really important bit is producers will validate the data. Because still at the end of the day, if data has to have value to be any use to anyone, and that value actually has to help producers manage their farm businesses, make better decisions, increase productivity. So, I don't think it's a matter of, I sort of get the context of the question. It's more about, who's going to own it and all that sort of stuff. But I'm less alarmist about those sorts of things, because at the end of the day, if data isn't being collected in a way that helps producers improve, it's just not going to be collected. It's as simple as that.
I'm actually just going to break my own rule and just do one more. That's okay. I'll just ask Michelle to answer the bottom one if she's available to do that, please.
Yeah, so I really like the one about the portion of food being purchased in store versus direct to consumer, and whether supermarkets are the next Kodak. So I think when we think about food, it's less about where it's purchased, because when we look at fresh in supermarkets, for instance, it's really underpenetrated in terms of consumer participation. And so for me, the way I'd like to think about that question is what are the formats, or what are the new business models that you could be considering to think about the food experience quite differently? And I think that's where the Eataly example is really quite interesting in terms of what it provokes by way of thinking. So where you shop can now be where you eat, right? And when you think about the convenience of food shopping during the week versus, the food experience during the weekend, it's quite different. So as your mission changes, and as supermarkets start to think about their customer, how they think about their formats and their experience, that really starts to move the dial around thinking food less as a commodity as opposed to a mission, and how you actually fulfill that mission. So I think if you don't change, you can become extinct. But I think if you start to think about evolution, if you think about the customer and what they're needing, I think that then provides a very different answer to the question.
Thank you, Michelle. And I'd just like to thank our panellists again, or our presenters.